Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
This is episode 284. In just a couple of weeks, we will be at episode 300, and there's going to be some minor changes. I've talked about these a little bit, and I am getting closer and closer to being ready to wind up implementing these changes, and again, that will wind up being episode 300. And so basically, this will wind up being like Peace, Love, Liberty Radio 4.0, if you will, because there's the original run of live shows that was actually a live show, not recorded live, and that ran for a couple of years. And then at episode 100 is when I switched over to doing the the thrice weekly recorded version of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Made some changes to the music beds at episode 200. We'll make another couple of changes, not only to the music beds, but also, again, the format of the show at episode 300. So it will be Peace, Love, Liberty Radio 4.0 in just a couple of weeks. And since today is the beginning of the month, tomorrow is Groundhog Day. That's the day that, they claim if Puxatawny Phil or any of the other numerous furry weather prognosticators, if they see their shadow, then it's 6 more weeks of winter, 6 weeks until spring, something, and then if they don't, then it's the other thing. But here's the little secret. No matter what happens, it's still the same amount of time until the official beginning of spring. Spring officially begins March 21st, and you can do the math, and yes, that is 6 weeks, roughly, from February 2nd. So it makes absolutely no difference, although I do like the unofficial version of Groundhog Day that has not yet been implemented, where you merge Groundhog Day with President's Day, and you shove a politician in a hole, and if he can see his shadow, you've not shoved him in far enough, and just push a little bit more. And for anybody that might be listening, no, I'm not actually advocating that you shove a politician in a hole, because that would wind up violating the non-aggression principle, and that would not be a good thing. But I'll tell you what is a good thing, the Freedom Book Club. Again, it's the beginning of the month, and Freedom Book Club, which relaunched back in December, announces their winners at the beginning of every month. The winner has already been announced online and on the Facebook, on Twitter, and on the website for FreedomBook.Club. The winner of the February book of the month is Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis. The nominees for March book of the month, and yes, the book of the month is selected in the previous month, or it's voted on, rather, in the previous month. So the February voting took place in January. March voting takes place in February. April voting takes place in March, etc., etc. So the nominees for March book of the month from Freedom Book Club: How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett, Napster's Big Freaking Book of Stuff by Tom Knapp, Markets Not Capitalism by Gary Chartier, and No Treason, The Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner. And you might be thinking to yourself, but wait a second, one of those is a really old book. Yes, it is a really old book, but it still meets the criteria for the Freedom Book Club. Those criteria are that the book that it meet both of the following criteria: that it have been written, edited, or published by someone espousing the ideas of liberty, and that the book has been published or republished within the past 5 years. So if a new version of a book comes out, then that book can be considered in the next 5 years for the FreedomBook.Club Book of the Month and the Book of the Year award. I've still not decided, because I am the person running the Freedom Book Club. I've still not decided how I'm going to wind up setting up the voting for Book of the Year, but I will figure that out, make that announcement in early August, possibly as late as September, about how that will be decided and when that announcement will take place, because that's really the thing. It's not just how do you decide, but when do you make the announcement, and I'll be figuring that out later in the year. And again, I'll probably make that announcement in August, possibly September. Now, let me get into a couple of news stories that you may or may not have heard about. If you listen to the daily newscast that I do, you've heard me mention some of this. The Syrian peace talks that are taking place, they began on Friday in Geneva. And, well, there's some problems with the peace talks. And one of the problems is that nobody can really agree who to invite, but they are agreeing on who to not invite. And some of those not invited showed up anyway and then promptly left after being told that, you can't participate in these meetings. The story comes from antiwar.com. And this first story is from Saturday. A negotiation team from the Kurdish PYD, which is the political wing of the YPG militia, departed Switzerland after being told that they were not allowed to participate in the UN peace talks on Syria, which began on Friday. Though they are one of the largest factions in the Syrian civil war and hold almost the entire Hasaka province, the PYD/YPG were not invited on the demands of Turkey. So let me just reiterate one thing here. One of the largest factions involved in the Syrian civil war was not invited to participate because of Turkey, because Turkey is afraid that if the Kurds wind up getting some semblance of autonomy or international recognition for an independent Kurdistan, then the Turks might wind up losing some of their territory and some of their people. Now, the Kurds are not Turks, but some of them live in Turkey. The thing with Kurdistan is again, it's not an officially recognized country, but there are regions that are recognized as being, ethnically Kurdish. And the ethnically Kurdish areas span parts of Turkey, parts of Syria, and parts of Iraq. And there are some within Kurdistan that are vowing to attempt to secede. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, as well as the Kurds being told they're not welcome at the peace talks. And who else is not welcome at the peace talks? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned to find out. This is Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of PhonePhone right now at PhonePhone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve PhonePhone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to PhonePhone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's PhonePhone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
PhonePhone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So let me get back into the article here about the Kurds being told that they are not welcome at the Syrian peace talks. And then I do have that story about the Kurdish secession, as well as others who were not invited to the peace talks. But again, let me just continue with the story here from antiwar.com. The PYD/YPG, the PYD is the political arm of the YPG militia in Kurdistan. The PYD/YPG were not invited to the talks on the demand of Turkey, who insists that they are terrorists. And Turkey, again, they're claiming that the PYD and YPG are terrorists because they're secessionist and they don't want to be part of Turkey, and Turkey doesn't want to lose some of their tax base. Both Russia and the U.S. had sought the inclusion of the PYD, with Russia suggesting they might be able to participate later, even if they did not arrive on the first day. And, well, we know that they wound up heading home on Saturday, which would have been the second day of the peace talks. PYD co-president Salah Muslim was among the delegations sent to Geneva, and while the group was carefully sequestered from the pro-Saudi Higher Negotiations Committee, it was hoped they might find a spot at the table, given how few factions managed to show up in the first place. Turkey's refusal to allow any Kurds at the talks, along with resistance from other rebel factions who insist the Kurds focus on fighting the Islamic State, means that they aren't proper Syrian rebels, ultimately kept them out of the talks, which means the first round will be between the Syrian government and a coalition representing a handful of mostly trivial rebel factions. Now, let me tell you about some of the others at the UN-brokered peace talks in Geneva. Again, the story comes from antiwar.com, and they report, after responding to their invitations with a series of demands, then refusing to attend, Syrian rebel negotiators finally showed up in Geneva with an eye towards continuing to press those same demands, including the release of all rebel prisoners and an end to all airstrikes against rebel territory. Indeed, it's still not clear if the rebel delegation is in Geneva, and the story is from yesterday, and, well, we still don't really know if the rebels are actually in Geneva or not. So that's still accurate. Let me continue. Or rather, let me back up to the beginning of this sentence and then continue. Indeed, it is still not clear if the rebel delegation is in Geneva to participate in the talks at all, and their first discussion with UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura have centered not around the peace process, but around their preconditions for participation. That and their threats to leave, though none of their preconditions for attending the talks were met, they still showed up and are now insisting if those demands, which no one has agreed to, aren't met awfully soon, they'll be out the door. So here you have another group that wants to participate. They're not being told that they can't participate, but they're listing a bunch of demands, and they're saying, if you don't meet our demands, we're going to leave. And nobody seems willing to meet their demands. And, well, right now we don't know if they're leaving or if they're staying or if they're even in Geneva in the first place. The article here concludes, there was not much expectation that the Syrian peace talks were going to amount to much in the first place, as the United Nations had no intention of allowing the government and rebels to even be in the same room, and major factions like the Kurds were overtly forbidden from participating. Given that, it's unclear why they wanted everyone in the same city to begin with, and having gotten at least a handful of delegates into the city, what it could possibly lead to. And this is something that's very interesting to me, is you have these peace talks, but nobody's allowed to be in the same room. So you have people that are running back and forth as messengers between the delegates in various rooms. So why do they have to all be in Geneva? They could have stayed home and done this over like a Google Hangout sort of thing. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. And there was a previous round of peace talks, and nothing happened from that. And again, they were not in the same room, except for on one occasion. And that one occasion was a press conference where one side attacked the other. And it was absolutely a horrible display, because, it's supposed to be about peace, and then no peace actually happens. And it's just incredibly strange, aside from the fact that no peace is actually happening, the fact that, well, they're not even in the same room when they're trying to negotiate. Now, let me tell you about the Kurds and secession, because, again, that's part of the reason that Turkey does not want any of the Kurds represented, is because the Turks are afraid that the Kurds are going to wind up getting some semblance of recognition as an independent nation, and then they'll leave Turkey, as well as, or they'll leave parts of Turkey, take parts of Syria and parts of Iraq. Well, the Iraqi Kurds have announced that they will wind up holding a referendum on secession. Again, the article comes from antiwar.com. Ongoing tensions between Iraq's central government and the Kurdistan Regional Government, the KRG, looks like they're going to be getting much worse, with Kifa Mahmoud, an advisor to the Kurdish president, reporting that the KRG has agreed to a referendum on declaring independence from Iraq. The Kurds have had long-standing ambitions to secede from Iraq, and officials have talked up the idea of withdrawing from Iraq as soon as the war against the Islamic State is over. The United States has opposed this, saying they want a unified Iraq. And this is something that I have a major issue with. Not the Kurds wanting to secede. That is not my issue at all. My issue is with the U.S. government dictating to other countries that, no, you are not allowed to secede from part of this country, because we, the great and powerful United States of America, we decree that this country remain united. It doesn't matter that Iraq was created out of 3 independent countries after World War II. Or actually, they weren't independent. They were, like protectorate sort of things, but it was 3 distinct nations. And there's a difference between a nation and a country, and a nation and an independent country, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but Iraq was created from various mandates, I think is the official term used by the United Nations. So I'll actually pull up some of that info and go over that before continuing with this article about the threats of secession by the Kurds and what that could possibly mean for the future, not just of Iraq, but of the Middle East as well.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience. Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. The liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So before I continue giving some of the history of Iraq and finishing the story about the possible secession of Kurdistan, specifically Iraqi Kurdistan, and then following that, possibly the Turkish and Syrian portions of Kurdistan, I want to make sure that I tell you a way that you can keep your money in the free market. That is, if you advocate for free market money and promote Bitcoin as an alternative in a fiat-centric world. If so, you need Spend-A-Bit in your arsenal. Spend-A-Bit is the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin accepting merchant like I am, ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. Spendabit.fppradio.com. That's spendabit.fppradio.com. So I was looking up and doing a little bit of research here on Iraq, and I said that Iraq was created from separate nations, separate countries, and that's kind of true. It was actually former Ottoman provinces. There was the province of Baghdad, province of Mosul, and province of Basra. They were proposed to be part of a mandate under British rule, known as the British Mandate for Mesopotamia, and it was kind of under this mandate for a while from 1920 until 1932, and then in 1932 there was the Kingdom of Iraq that was formed that existed until 1958, and we all know what happened in 1958. Well, actually, no, we don't know what happened in 1958, but we all remember what happened in 1959. 1958, there was the Arab Federation of Iraq and Jordan, which was a short-lived country that was formed in 1958 from the Union of Iraq and Jordan. And it says, although the name implies a federal structure, it was de facto confederation. And then in 1959, there was the Iraqi Republic that lasted until 1968. And then in 1968, there was the Ba'athist Iraqi Republic, also called Ba'athist Iraq, but it was officially the Iraqi Republic. But that was the republic that was run by the Ba'ath Party, of which Saddam Hussein was a member, and we all remember what happened in 2003 when the U.S. military decided to invade Iraq because basically George W. Bush was upset that his daddy didn't, quote-unquote, finish the job in 1991, and Bill Clinton didn't really do any war-type stuff too much in Iraq, even though the U.S. military did enforce no-fly zones, and there were sanctions and other things that, are basically acts of war but there wasn't the bomb-dropping sort of stuff. And, well, 9/11 was a very convenient excuse for George Bush to send in military and slaughter a bunch of Iraqis. Now, let me get back into the story here about the possible independent Kurdistan. The article, again, from antiwar.com continues. The biggest question arising from a possible secession of the Kurdistan regional government is what territory they'll take with them, as early in the war against the Islamic State, they seized key oil-producing regions, including Kirkuk, and more recently have been expelling Arabs from the Sinjar area to try to make it a Kurdish Yazidi-dominated region. So the Kurds, not what I would consider to be, peaceful people by any stretch of the imagination, but I do support the right of self-determination for everybody. So, on the one hand, while I don't agree with what the Kurds are doing, I do agree that, they should not be ruled over by people that they don't want ruling over them. So I begrudgingly would support an independent movement there in Kurdistan, or, I shouldn't say an independent movement, because there has been an independence movement in Kurdistan for a long time, but I do fully support their right to break away from any country that they are a part of. The article here continues. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider Abadi's office offered a warning against any unilateral vote by the Kurds, saying that it would be against the constitution and illegal. The Iraqi central government has seen the risk of secession coming for a while and has pushed against arming the Kurds to fight against the Islamic State on fear that it would heavily arm the Kurdish Peshmerga, or rather that a heavily armed Kurdish Peshmerga would be able to fight a war of secession. The legal question may matter less and less as time goes on, however, as the Peshmerga has gotten a lot of weaponry and Iraq's military is scarcely in a position to contest a secession by anyone, with so much of the country already under control of the Islamic State. And there's a couple of things that were mentioned in this article here that are basically false presumptions. The statement by the Prime Minister of Iraq, Haider Abadi, saying that, well, if you give the Kurds weapons, then they'll just be able to fight for independence. Well, they don't need to fight if you don't fight against them. It's one of the arguments of, well, do you want to fight them over here, or do you want to fight them over there? It presumes that a fight is going to happen. And fights don't have to happen. You can let them leave. This is what, and it's not just this, but when I say this, I'm not talking about specifically the situation in Iraq where they don't want the Kurds to leave, but pretty much every secessionist movement or secession attempt has been fought by the larger entity trying to prevent the others from leaving, and that is what makes me draw the parallel between the secessionists, that being the people that want to leave, being a battered spouse, and the larger entity that wants to prevent them from leaving being the abusive spouse. Uncle Sam is an abusive husband, and that's really, as far as I can break it down, Uncle Sam is an abusive husband. And if you need examples of this, look at the American Civil War. And yes, I am by no means trying to say that the people running the Confederate government were blameless. They were far from being blameless. There was plenty of blame to go around during that entire thing. But it was Uncle Sam that was preventing them from leaving. Basically saying, if I can't have you, nobody will, and I'll kill you if I have to. That's what an abusive spouse does. I'll post links in the show notes, and don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. Send those over, AMA at FTPradio.com.